So, how do I even begin to tell you about my Uncle Chuck? It's a question I've been wrestling with since Ginger called me last week and asked me to represent the family in sharing what a remarkable man he was. A lot's been said already, and I could go on about how many lives he impacted in such a tremendous way. I could spend this time talking solely about his extreme generosity, or his unbelievable success as a business person and as a legislator, about his unshakable moral code and his strong values. And oh my gosh, we could talk all day about his humor because boy was he funny. We could talk about his love of and appreciation for beautiful things, his sense of style, and boy did he have a way with words. We could talk about that. When asked what he used to do for a living, he would often joke that he was just a professional schmoozer, which was just the kind of self-deprecating thing that he would say. But the reality is this man, he really had a way with words. He had the ability to make people feel like he was really interested in and really cared about what they were saying, even when he didn't, which I am positive was a lot more often than he let on. Don't get me wrong, he was a super curious person, and he had so many interests. But because he genuinely cared so much about others, he really made us feel like he wanted to hear everything we had to say. You all probably know about his ability to throw an amazing party. And I could spend this time talking about his faith, which I watched grow and grow more and more later in life. And I could spend the rest of the day talking about his devotion to his family. He loved and cared for his family in a way that few people do. But man, just listing those things, it doesn't scratch the surface. It doesn't get at the core of this incredible, incredible man who gave so much to this world. He could be a man of few words, and if he were here, he'd tell me, honey, you've gone on too long already. Get off that stage. But I'm going to tell some stories, and I tried to arrange them in some categories in my mind, and I'm calling these key life lessons from Chuck, which he mostly taught all of us just simply by doing them, and just by us observing how he lived his life, more than any sort of long drawn-out lectures he gave, because again, he wasn't a sermonizer. He got to the point. He just did these things day in and day out. And by making us adore him and respect him and want to be like him, he taught us these things. And you'll see that all these stories bleed into each other because all of these topics overlap. So I'm going to list them all three right now, and then I'll try and break them out a little bit. Number one is believe you can do it. Number two, invest in your family. And number three, help when and where you can. So we'll start with believe you can do it. As you all know, he had an unbelievable career, and the majority of it was with Pfizer. And by the way, I'm going to get some of these details wrong because, you know, I just am. But I assure you, it won't be as bad as if my mom were up here. Because those four kids, they loved each other like and I've never seen before. And my mom was his only sister, and so they were really extraordinarily close. So if she were here, she would be telling you all about how he was president and CEO of Pfizer Pharmaceutical and the United States. And I'm not going to do that. But bear with me for the mistakes I made. Anyway, his career was incredible, and if you didn't meet him until later in life, you would never know the difficult circumstances that he grew up on. Lots of people say that at eulogies, but he had some rough times. Didn't faze him, didn't dwell. He just moved on. Even very early in his career, he would take the job that nobody else wanted, and they said it can't be done. I remember hearing about him getting the worst sales route in the entire state. He turned it around and made it number one. No big deal, then he got promoted and did it again. I mean, that's just how he was. That approach into life resulted in him rising to what I'm probably wrongly calling the Pfizer Five, but he was in the very top leadership circle of this huge international company, where he also was the head of philanthropy, and he made sure that Pfizer gave back where people were most in need. But what most people, including those from Pfizer, remember him for is his kindness and his humor as a leader. And several Pfizer people sent really lovely remembrances about that. And I've just picked two from all the wonderful things that were said about him by the people he used to work with. From Kathy Wendell's, "You may all enjoy an anecdote about my very favorite exchange with Chuck. I had to call him from a train station to report on a particular project he had assigned to me, which involved getting an editorial into the Wall Street Journal. I told him the article was in the paper. He asked me what the noise was in the background, and I said I was on my way to jury duty in White Plains. Chuck was silent for a long moment and then commented, 'I feel sorry for the criminal.'" And then from Paula Luff, "When I had the twins, Chuck sent Sheila to check on me just before they were born. I was the size of the Hindenburg. She brought lunch, which I struggled to eat. I mean, I could barely sit in a chair. About a minute after she left my apartment, he called. Sheila had filled him in, and he told me to log off right now and to call him once the girls were born." He also had an incredible career as a legislator, but I think some of the work he was most proud of was in fighting the casinos to protect those who were struggling with compulsive gambling. Some of this work stemmed from him going to hear a man named Arnie Wexler speak back in 1976. And if you don't know who Arnie Wexler is, he is very open about the fact that he's a recovering compulsive gambler himself. And he spent a big part of his life as a certified compulsive gambling counselor. And he was the executive director of the Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey for 8 years. Arnie is one of the foremost experts on compulsive gambling in this country, and this is what he wanted us to remember about Chuck. He got the funding to start the Council on Compulsive Gambling in New Jersey and was one of Arnie's best friends for the rest of his life. He put through the legislation so people could get help if they had a gambling addiction, including making it a requirement to put call 1-800-GAMBLER on all casino and lottery ads. Arnie said that thanks to Chuck, so many people got help and it saved both their and their families' lives. He said no one in government in America did more to help compulsive gamblers than Chuck. We have lost one of the giants in the history of New Jersey. I love Chuck. He was sure one special man. So there you go. Believe you can do it and help when you can. My Uncle Chuck looked at those casino giants in Atlantic City and elsewhere, and he believed he could take them on, and he did. And here's another story about how he passed the believe you can do it and invest in your family and help when you can lessons onto me all at once during that time when he was really involved in fighting against the casinos. I was visiting Chuck and Pat in New Jersey in the early 80s, and he was deep in the throes of this work. And he was often called to testify to DC, and he also appeared on many national and local news shows to talk about it. While I was visiting, we were running around in the car in the New Jersey, and he said, "Honey, we just gotta make one real quick stop." I said, "Sure, Uncle Chuck, we can stop wherever you want." He pulls into Newark International Airport, and he pulls right up to the no stopping zone, almost on the sidewalk. And he looks at me and he says, "Honey, I just gotta run in for a quick minute." He said, "If those policemen come over here and tell you to move, you just drive around and just come right back and I'll be out here by then." I looked at him and I said, "Uncle Chuck, I don't have my license." And he looked at me and he says, "Well, you can drive, can't you?" I said, "Well, I don't know." He goes, "I'll tell you what you do." He said, "If they come over here, you just stall. I'm gonna be super fast." And I was like, "All right, I know, I can do this." And why he needed to run into the airport was he was buying me a plane ticket to go with him to DC. And when we went to DC, I got to watch him testify in front of Congress, Senate, I don't know, I know I was blown away. And then we went and I got to watch him get taped for a national news show where he was talking about it. And I don't know what else we did, but I was ready to go home, and he said, "Oh, we're gonna go to lunch with a bunch of senators." I don't know, I mean, power guys. I looked at him, I'm like 16 years old. I thought, "What do you mean we're gonna go to lunch with a bunch of legislators?" And he's like, I said, I don't know what to say to those people. He goes, oh, you'll be fine. You're gonna make me look good. You just come and it'll be good. And again, he just told me, you can do this. And I'm like, all right, off we go. And we did. It was me and like 8 or 9 men around the table at the Capitol Grill. And we had a really nice lunch. So again, believe you can do it and help when you can. Speaking of criminals, here's one more thing you may not know about Chuck. He was a criminal himself. I know, it's surprising. I just found out myself last night. But it's kind of his son, Chuck Jr.'s fault. Chuck was a big sports fan, and when Chucky would come to visit, they would often go to games. And he had 4 tickets to a New York Giants game. And he and Chucky were gonna go. And they didn't have anybody else to go with them. And Chucky said, Dad, these are good tickets. We can sell these. So they went to the game, and Chucky said he's standing there saying, who wants tickets? Who wants tickets? And the security came over and arrested them. And they took them down to that basement room where they take all the people who are drunk that get kicked out of the stadium. And they're on the little golf cart, and they go down there. Well, Chuck knew he could get out of that. He just started talking, and he started telling them this and that, and they looked at him and he said, you're good, you guys go in. And off they went. So he doesn't have a record, but he was a criminal. Speaking of the New York Giants, he really enjoyed sports in general, and the ones I remember him the most for are tennis and baseball. He was a really good tennis player, and he tried to share that love with all of us, and he gave me a few lessons. And I was terrible. I mean, the man's love could only go so far. We would have got ice cream about 15 minutes later. But he loved tennis, and he loved the New York Yankees. He was the biggest New York Yankees fan I knew, and he really especially loved Lou Gehrig. And this is my Uncle Chuck's grace and humor. My dad and I, with whom he had a very special relationship, were visiting him a couple months after he got diagnosed. And he could still talk, and we had a great visit. And he turned to us at one point and he said, you know, I always said I was the New York Yankees' biggest fan, and I really love Lou Gehrig, but this is taking it a little bit far. And he just laughed, and we did too. Being a Yankees fan meant that he hated the Red Sox. I mean, he hated the Boston Red Sox, and a lot of his family lived in Boston, and he still let us wear our Red Sox caps into the house. But because he hated the Red Sox, that meant he wasn't a real big fan of Massachusetts either. He really did not like that state at all. But when he was looking around at where would be the best place for his family and the best place for his son Austin to go to school, you know where he moved? Massachusetts. Didn't say a word, but he did this, because this was also my Uncle Chuck. He never would pronounce the name of that state correctly. Now, I am telling you, this man is the smoothest talker I have ever known and in my life. And every time I talk to him, he'd say, yeah, well, I'm heading back to Massachusetts next week. And I do a double take. I'm like, Massachusetts? What? And then at first I thought, well, maybe that's why he hates the state. It's the one word in the English language he can't pronounce. And then I realized that's not it. This is his own private revenge, man. He's calling that Massachusetts. And that's what he does. Anyway, I know I'm biased. And I got to live in the light of his love from enough of a distance that it was just all love and kindness. And he also was an exacting person. I know he wasn't perfect, and I know that there were days that he was hard to live with. He did not suffer fools, and he wanted things kept nice. And take your shoes off when you come in the house, and for the love of God, turn the kitchen light off. Walk out. Am I right? Even when he lost the gift of speech, those rules held. And he would communicate them with his eyes and his hand gestures. I mean, it was a lot of work there at the end for him to get his message across. And I'm thinking he's going to save it for like all these imparting gifts of wisdom. And I'm listening, and I'm listening, and I'm listening. And he would not give up until one of us in the room finally figured out he was saying, someone left the kitchen light on again. He also did not want you to use your hands if you reached into a community bowl of mixed nuts. And if you don't take a napkin when you take some hors d'oeuvres from his house, he's going to chase you down and give you one. But these are rules we could and we should all live by. He was so patient with us, though. We'd forget and we would break every single damn rule, and the next time we were in town, he'd still invite us back. As a dad, I know he's a little different. He had high expectations for everyone, but his immediate family members are the ones he made live up to them. The rest of us, it was more like, all right, I tried to tell them, and here they go again, but whatever, they're my family, so my kids are not going to get away with this crap, but what could I do? It's just another testament to his parenting that they loved us still, because they had to clean the whole house before we showed up, and I mean dusting like the flats of the blinds, and we just come in and train wreck the pace. Here's one example of Uncle Chuck finally getting fed up with us and laying down the law. You know, he had this beautiful beach house on the Jersey Shore that he was so generous and invited us all to. And I'm telling you, he would fill that house with as many people as he could squeeze in. He would find beds, and it was a full house for sure. So, I mean, for me, I was young. I had not even begun building my career, so this was nicer than any luxury resort I could have stayed at the time. He could have given me any rules he wanted. He came around and one day he told us all, he's like, here's your one set of towels. And this is all you get. You get a towel, you get a hand towel, you get a washcloth. Don't be throwing it on the floor, because I'm not going around and everybody's not going through 20 towels in this house. He's like real stern, like this is not a luxury cruise. And then he'd turn around and get in his car and drive into town and buy like 25 lobsters and cook them all for us. That was my strict Uncle Chuck. You can't talk about the whole of Chuck's life without mentioning Pat. Because while they worked forever loves, they built a life together and they built a family together, and that family brought us Chucky and Ginger and his 3 amazing grandkids, Jake and Sarah and Ben, who he just adored. And he also loved Pat's family, and Pat loved his family. He continued to support her parents until the day he died, and a testament of his love is that lots of Pat's family is here today, and there will be more in New Jersey. Family was family forever for him. But speaking of family, I saved the best for last. I'm going to wrap up by talking about the whole of his family. You absolutely cannot talk about Chuck without talking about Sheila and Austin. And again, Ginger and Chucky and Helen and Mark and Jake and Sarah and Ben, because I can tell you all that the way he loved all of them was something you don't get to see very often. And the pride he had in all of them was something that you don't get to see very often. The love he had for Sheila, he was completely over the moon in love with you, Sheila. And I knew it from the first time I met you, the way he looked at you. And so he brought Sheila to us, and that love enlarged his life so much, and then it enlarged their lives because it brought us Austin, and now we have Austin in the family too. Back to Sheila, I'll never forget their first dance on their wedding day. The way he looked at her, it was something to behold. And God love you, Sheila. I know it's every woman's dream to have a Hardwick family reunion as part of your wedding day. But if their wedding, it really was a Hardwick family reunion. There were shirts made, there were bracelets made, and I just thought, that poor woman, does she know what she's getting herself into? But she just went with it, and she's gone with it ever since. And she is such an important part of our family, and Austin is too. Anyway, all of these examples taught us you believe that you can, you invest in your family, and you try to help. I'm going to leave you with this. While we miss them already, and while I don't presume to be smart enough to know exactly happens when we pass from this life to the next, With this particular case and this particular man, I know this. It doesn't matter because Chuck Hardwick is not gone from this earth. He lived his life that way with intention. He lives on in all of us who knew and loved him, or at least I know for sure that man lives on in me. And what he would really, really want all of us to do to honor him is this. Believe you can do it. Invest in your family. And please, wherever your lives take you, try to help when you can. And Chuck lives in you too. Thank you.